I'm the type of white guy who's in hip hop, interested in hip hop, around rappers. Rappers seem to be kind of drawn to me. They like having conversations with me.
I seen you in the Juice WRLD documentary.
But I'm not the type of white boy who's just begging for everybody to like me. I'm actually out here being myself, and I'm not modifying or augmenting my personality to make people appreciate me more. I'm just really being myself. So that was probably the problem, is that I was having that conversation with Richard Spencer, and I was actually asking him the things that I was interested in. Keep in mind that I've watched a bunch of his recent interviews and streams and stuff where I had seen him kind of talk about the race thing at length. And if anything, I wasn't doing enough in that moment to see it from the average viewer's perspective. Although, actually, I think the average viewer seemed like they just thought it was a really great conversation.
They probably did.
I wasn't doing enough to view it from the Van Lathan perspective.
That's fine.
And I am somebody who cares about what a Van Lathan is going to think of the conversations that I have on camera. So in that sense, if I had been able to do an extra 30 or 40 minutes of that podcast, and it would have made you feel like it was a more fair depiction of this conversation, or if it would have been just much more interesting for the people out there, then I definitely wish that I did that, because I was able to do that, because as much as this channel is reflective of just what I'm interested in, I also want to give the people what they want. For that reason, I definitely wish that I had dug into those topics a bit more.
That's fair. Let me drop something on you real quick, because that's fair. And once again, it's your shop. I don't think that there was any malice in it. We talked about it. You know what I mean? So it's like, it is what I'm saying. But this is sometimes what like a Van Lathan type gets frustrated with. So I have all kinds of cultural responsibilities, right? Mm-hmm. I have a cultural responsibility to protect Black women. I have a cultural responsibility to consider the Black community. I have not always lived up to that, right? Mm-hmm. You can't. You have to live for yourself sometimes, and sometimes you're in places that don't reflect the best version of you, you know? When I was at TMZ, at first I didn't, but after that I sincerely tried to be a specific type of voice there. It's just difficult to do in a place that doesn't really have a cultural direction. And I'll come back to that a little bit later, right? But what I would say is this. If I was to make my media presence felt, my cultural presence felt in anybody else's culture, if I was in a place where it was all Italian Americans, if I was in a place where it was all Jewish people, if I was in other places in the diaspora where people are Black, if right now I'm doing an interview, me, Van Lathan, I'm doing an interview in Kingston with dancehall artists, right? I'm not going to be able to go into anybody else's cultural space and say, I don't really care about the responsibilities that I have to that cultural space. It doesn't exist for me.
I think
the only people who can do that are white people. And they do it, and they do it in such a way that the line between participation and exploitation sometimes gets blurred, right? So like what I'm saying is like, if I want to go have a conversation in a synagogue, or if I want to have a conversation even about Israeli music, if I want to have a conversation in rock, if I want to have a conversation, I had better adhere to some of the cultural rules that reflect that people. You come from the punk world, right?
A little bit.
A little bit. You understand that that's a very dense cultural expression, and they do not accept posers, right? They do not accept posers. Mm-hmm. So if you go into that space, you're going to have to try in some way to relate or even consider what's going on out there. When white people come into Black cultural spaces, they don't do that. They do exactly what you just said. What they do is they say, hey, you know what? I'm doing all of this, and I've built my X got me popping, and this interview got me popping, and AD and T-Rail and all of this. But when I want to talk to Richard Spencer, none of that stuff matters. The only thing that matters now is what it is that I want to do. And that sometimes...
I've always just been doing what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
It's just at a certain point, what I'm into or what I'm interested in, a large chunk of it, and it's the stuff that has been the stickiest and the most successful on the internet, has been the Black culture adjacent stuff. And I think that...
So you're interested in us, but you just don't feel like you have any responsibility to us.
No, I'm interested in people and the music and stuff like that. My thing is that...
But not whether or not a white supremacist is on your platform. Richard Spencer's a white supremacist.
I choose to take his words at face value, and I find it very hard to interview somebody and along the way paint a negative portrayal of them when they're sitting right there telling me who they are and what they believe.
Yeah, but you did it to Ruga.
No.
Ruga told you he didn't want to talk about something. Ruga told you how he wanted something to go, and you were so interested in that part of whatever was going on that you decided that you were going to ask him anyway, because it's what you had to get to.
Again,
right?
I did the least beef-oriented interview in Ruga's entire life.
But understand the difference between what it is. You just said, I take somebody at face value, they say something, I'm with that. He straight up told you.
Richard Spencer didn't run away from the conversation when I asked him about the racist stuff. Ruga didn't run away from it during the context of the conversation at all. He just later on decided that he had a very different opinion
but
of
what
it.
what I'm saying is you wanted to investigate. Here's the thing.
Probably a 2-minute conversation when I asked him about Dirk.
Here's the thing.
Out of an hour and something
Here's the
long
thing.
interview.
The reality is, and this is okay, you're not interested in whether or not Richard Spencer is still a white supremacist.
No, I was definitely interested, but once he said that he no longer thought it was a good use of his time or that he wasn't interested in that or whatever, I mean, I have to take him at face value on that. Unfortunately, it felt like the conversation kind of moved past that a little too quickly, where if we had actually dwelled on that topic for an extra half hour or 45 minutes, it probably would have made everybody a little bit more happy. That being said, the reality is that when it comes down to serving my audience, I assume that probably like 95% of black people who have ever watched No Jumper don't even know who Richard Spencer is, right? Like that conversation seemed like it was clearly a conversation that was basically for the debate world.
Right.
I got Destiny sitting there. He's had conversations with Nick Fuentes a million times. He's had conversations with all kinds of different
very bright guy.
extremist people or whatever. Yeah. It really, if anything, I blame you because I asked you to be on that podcast and you turned me down because you were too scared of the smoke. You didn't think that you would be able to bring it properly to old Rich.
I would cut Richard Spencer in half, but that's not
Rich Homie Quan, as I call him.
See, you like this nigga. but I mean, it's not even about that for me. Because once again, right, I'm not a COE guy. I'm not a content over everything guy. To me, like I have fun and I do all of my things, but I care about how I'm perceived within my community because I feel like I need to be an asset to my community. There's a stature in a way that I want to be received. So you're not really gonna see me going back and forth with people. If somebody has that big of a problem, I'm in the gym 3 or 4 times a week. We can meet, we can fight, it's cool. But like, I'm not going to devalue myself or devalue what I feel like my narrative is or my calling is for any types of likes of views.